when I talk about hope, sometimes it feels a little bit cheesy, but it is, I think it is possibly one of the greatest survival tools that we have.
Welcome to the follow-up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore what it means to find common ground at a time when it feels increasingly harder to do so, to listen more than we speak so that we can understand that our differences don't have to divide us. My aim with this show is to bring you perspectives and ways of looking at issues or topics that perhaps you haven't considered before, so that you can then take that new knowledge and apply it to your ability to empathize with the people around you. I'm a former journalist who believes everyone has a story to tell, and it's only when we ask questions and listen that we truly reveal what connects us as humans. Our dreams, our desires, our experiences, our ideas, and who we truly are.
This is not where I expected to end up. The shattered pelvis. In the desert. I might die here, and I'm really scared that that's the case, and I don't know what to do. I can't get a signal out here, and I call for help, and no one's out here. This is the stupidest thing I've ever done.
That's the voice of Claire Nelson, recording herself with her camera moments after she fell 25 feet after she had taken a wrong turn on a trail in Joshua Tree National Forest while on a hike in 2018. Claire shattered her pelvis in the fall, and because she was so far off trail, she was stranded out of earshot of anyone else in the remote desert park and without a cell signal. She couldn't move, she had very few supplies, and she was alone. For 4 days, Claire lies still between boulders in the sweltering heat of the California desert, reflecting on her life, her fears, and the things she had held most dear. Obviously, Claire survived, and she recently released a book, Things I Learned from Falling, to describe how her rescue and subsequent recovery came to pass. All of that you can read about in her book, which I highly encourage you to do because Claire is a phenomenally beautiful writer. But what I was particularly struck by was Claire's perspective shift she encountered having survived her ordeal. So many things she clung to before her fall, the things you and I and so many others worry and stress and argue about day in and day out, Claire now sees them through a strikingly different lens. And it is this perspective I had to understand better.
If I go through one more hot day like this, I'm a goner. I've got no more resources.
You write about in the book so poignantly about the need to re-engage and reattach with your boredom and your imagination. And the question that comes to my mind is, at what point, lying there in the desert on your back, did you get bored? Did you get bored? Did you get bored?
That's a really good question. I knew you were going to have some good questions. Did I get bored? I think yes. I'm hesitant to say yes because I think there was every moment there was something to keep me occupied. So whether that's a task to try and set my mind to doing, or whether that was kind of, looking back over my life and doing that whole, assessing of my existence. I don't know if it was boredom, because boredom, there was so much going on in my head. I don't remember being bored, but there would have been very boring moments, if that makes sense. Sure. There was a lot of hours where there was nothing going on, but my mind was certainly busy, if that answers that question.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I'd love to know then, why was boredom and re-engaging with your imagination a takeaway from that experience?
That's a fair question. And, it was really more from the recovery period that was a real wake up call for me. Because as soon, I was forced to be still and to be in one place for a while and not doing anything. And, in my case, I was spending time in a place that, to me, was the antithesis of where nothing happened, which was, the place I grew up and sort of in rural New Zealand. And I'm not very used to that. And obviously all of these, I realized that everything in my brain was constantly looking for, to be drawn out of that moment, to be drawn out of that present, taken to somewhere where I could just have constant stimuli, whether it was traveling, whether it was turning to my social media, something. And then just that, that moment when my mother said to me, you need to learn how to be bored. And it was just like a light bulb, like, wow, how much of my life am I spending trying not to engage in the present and trying to fill it with other stuff all the time? And so really set the path for me to learn how to do that, which, felt uncomfortable at first. And, I think there was also, it helped to have the motivator that if I didn't stay still, I wasn't going to recover as swiftly physically. And I wanted to get going. So it was kind of like, for the first time in my life, I had to learn how to be patient, which, I'm not. And, if I wanted to get to where I wanted to go, I was forced to do it.
You do touch on in the book the inaneness of social media. How do you feel about it now?
I still feel the same. And I have a lot of, I have this difficult relationship with social media where, I had this incredible takeaway of, wow, I've wasted so much of my life on this, on this medium. And yet I'm still on it. So kind of what does that mean? And then, of course, being thrown into the pandemic when it just felt like I was falling straight back into all of these old habits that I was so determined to change, and then feeling the guilt and the shame of all of that. So, in the past year and a half, certainly, I have had to work on that relationship and understand why I use social media, what value it gives me. Like, I've come off Facebook since then altogether. I'm just like cutting way back because they're useful tools. They're useful tools for all sorts of reasons. And like with Instagram, I enjoy it. There's elements of it too that are really enjoyable. So it's really about, okay, every time I use it, I'm having to remember to check in with myself of why am I on it right now? Have I picked this up out of boredom or habit? Am I procrastinating? Am I supposed to be doing something else right now that I don't want to do? Or am I actually on here because, I want to see what people are up to, or I need some inspiration, or there's something that I want to share, in which case it's valuable. But when I'm on it, outside of that, it's just a waste of time. So I'm just having to learn to recognize that boundary and that line and stop myself from constantly scrolling way past it into the wee hours of the night.
Claire, I don't know if this question's going to make sense, but what you just said there and kind of the dichotomy of, social media can be useful until it's not, you want to give yourself space to be boredom, but you're a hard charging, always want to keep busy person. Do you ever get the question of, and I'll phrase this how it's rolling around in my head. Do you ever get the question of, are you in some ways glad that what happened to you happened to you? Like, do you get that question?
I do in different variations. I do. And I don't know what people expect me to say.
Right.
And it's not like it's a straightforward answer. It's, and the way you've worded the question is, am I glad that it happened to me?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to go with yes, because I've survived it and I've come out with so much that's valuable. And, in a sort of strange irony, I ended up there because I had moved away and gone looking for some clarity and some levity in my life. So that experience fast-tracked it in a way I could never, ever have imagined. And so, I mean, I'm grateful to have had that. Would I want to go through it again? No, absolutely not. And would I recommend it to anyone, as a great process for some self-healing? Absolutely not. So, yeah, that's sort of the long and the short of it.
Yeah, as a hiker myself living in the mountains of Colorado, I do not want to have that same experience in any way, shape, or form as you. So,
I don't want you to have that experience either, Michael, at all.
Right. Claire, can you take us back there? I mean, I know you've probably recounted this story so many times, but I'm interested. When was the moment where you knew this is real trouble that I have gotten myself into?
That would be the first evening when the sun started to go down, because I had gone from, kind of like, I've hurt myself on a hike, right? That's bad. All of these other factors had come into it that I had no way of telling anyone I was there, and I was not on the trail, and all of these things. But there was still some part of my mind that was like, well, someone's going to come by and get me, because the idea that they wouldn't seemed so preposterous. So I think I was in that stage of grief where it was like I was in denial mode fully. But then once the sun started to go down, that was when it was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be lying injured in the desert at night. Then it was like, oh, this is another level, big time.
How did you keep your mind occupied in those moments?
Oh man, when people talk about survival mode, I now understand what that sort of is, or at least in my own experience. Your brain just starts to grab onto every tiny little thread of hope. And, when I talk about hope, sometimes it feels a little bit cheesy, but it is, I think it is possibly one of the greatest survival tools that we have. And I don't know if people have come to that realization themselves over this past year and a half of finding moments where hope is the thing that's keeping them going. But that really is what it was like for me. Like in any little tangible possibility of how somebody might find me, I would hang on to those things. So I was busy trying to search for those little threads so that I could just really hang on to them, and then they could really pull me through the difficult moments.
Have you at all reflected on the fact that so much, or it's several times in the book, you write about not wanting to agonize over the tiny details, and yet here you are saying, hey, in the desert, I'm trying to hold on to those tiny details. Have you reflected on that at all?
Well, no, because there's a difference between agonizing over the details that don't matter. So agonizing over the things, I think, I mentioned in the book, it's things like, I would always worry about like how I looked, or worried about how I came across to other people and stuff like that, stuff that didn't matter. And it was frustrating to think how much time and how much stress I spent on those things, when really they're very different to the little strands of hope that I was holding on to out there, which were actually a lifeline versus an obstacle in a way.
Was it at all, or has it been at all? I guess I'll phrase it this way, going back. What has the experience been like knowing that a mistake you made has turned into an inspiration for people, into a major story? You've had news outlets all over the world. You've been on podcasts. You've written a book about it now. What has that experience been like?
First of all, I really appreciate that question, because that's it's not always been the easiest journey necessarily, and I've never been asked that before. So thank you for asking me that. It's been a lot of, from the very beginning. I've been very, I've owned that mistake and been very vocal about the fact that I made so many mistakes, because I want, the fact that I managed to come out of the desert when other people haven't in situations like that is my duty now, to keep other people safe and let them know, basically let people learn from my mistakes, because it was an easy one to make, but it was a foolish one to make. And so there were all these, I wanted to really stress it in the book, like these things can happen to anybody, but here's how to, reduce the chance of them happening. So that's kind of like using, there's also, there's been so much great stuff that's come into my life after making such a mistake. But that's really because from mistakes we grow and mistakes we learn. So I want to take, the growth and the lessons and share those and actually try and then turn it into something valuable.
Is the biggest lesson that comes out of the book? What is the intended lesson that you hope comes out of the book? You write so much about vulnerability and openness and being truly known and seen and heard. And yet you're writing about a mistake made in the desert. What is the, I guess the question in all that is, what is the intended big lesson that you want people to really come away with this?
Well, I mean, of course, the story's got two parts to it, right? There's
Sure.
the days in the desert, and then there's the life that kind of led up to it. And so there are lessons. Obviously, there's the very physical lessons of, survival and how to stay safe when you're hiking. But the bigger lessons, let me put it this way, the desert story to me was somehow this physical manifestation of the journey I was going through outside of that. The sense of, I was dealing in London, I was dealing with isolation, not knowing how to ask for help, not allowing myself to be vulnerable, not feeling seen or heard, not connecting with people. And then I'm in the desert and suddenly I'm isolated. I can't ask for help. I'm not seen and heard. It's all of those things in a very different context, which then shines light on my life before. And so the lessons I think that I would like people to take from it, like perhaps above all else, I would say there's two. One being that a lot of the fears and the things that hold us back in our lives, we have created those for ourselves. And actually, when you're faced with real fear, those things completely dissolve, like they're not relevant. And when they lose their power and you see actually you've been giving them power the whole time, that's been the most profound change for me, is being able to see where I'm feeding those fears and those fears are stopping me from living my life to the full. Things like, I'm talking like imposter syndrome, self-doubt, fear of vulnerability, fear of, being hurt and all of these things. But they're not actual physical real threats. They're just things that I'm putting blocks up. So people can learn that they can actually remove the power of those things and then try and step over them. And then the second one would be to learn to open yourself up and connect with people in a real way. I think so many of us are, we've learned over time and through our lives to kind of keep a certain distance between our real vulnerable, child selves with everybody else, because we're trying to play the game, we're trying to keep up with everybody else and we don't want to be seen as perceived weak. So we hide all that stuff, and that just actually stops us from connecting with people in a real way. So those would be the two takeaways that I think I'd hold up above all else.
With your story being so known now, and even to the point where you've written a book about it, do you still struggle with those same things, or how has those struggles to be seen and known and vulnerable and open, how has that struggle changed for you, or has it changed? Perhaps
the thing is, all of those same fears and struggles are still there, because I really always wanted to make it very clear that I haven't walked out of the desert a changed person. I haven't come out transformed and I'm now very zen and, I'm just so happy and confident in life. No, I'm the same person, but I have that, I've been given that gift of perspective. So I still feel, the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt and all that stuff, which I tell you really gets highlighted when you've written a book and then you put it out in the world. But I have this thing now that I can kind of call back to and be like, no, okay, you're creating this anxiety for yourself. Let's just put that down. We don't need that right now. Step away from it. And so it kind of helps me to overcome them and to sort of wrestle back control from those fears in a way that I don't think I was able to do before at all.
Do you ever feel pressure to make it seem like you walked out of the desert? Well, actually, you were flown out by a helicopter.
Yeah.
You flew out of the desert. This, like you said, use your words, this Zen creature that just a phoenix rising from the ashes, totally changed. Do you ever feel that pressure being like labeled on you?
No, thankfully, there's been no pressure for that. And I think because I've been very adamant not to ever pretend that that's the case. And to even, like I talk about in the book, like I was diagnosed with, going through depression before the accident. And, I'm still on antidepressants. I mean, that's just something that'll take time for me to overcome as well, or to change, or to whatever is going to happen, or maybe I won't. I don't want anyone to feel like this is like the only way to overcome these things is to almost die. I don't recommend that. Don't try this at home, kids. So there's been no pressure. I think people maybe expect that, but they're sort of relieved when I say, no, it's, it's not the case.
Claire, you've laughed, you've smiled several times in detailing this. And just as you did right there, the question just popped into my mind, like, when were you able to smile about this? When was that first time?
Ooh. I mean, I was laughing with the rescuers while I was still lying injured in the canyon. I was making jokes. I'm very aware that humor is sort of my go-to comfort. In an uncomfortable situation, it's how I try and connect with people is through humor. And for better or worse, I'm not very good at not doing that. And certainly in the immediate aftermath of the rescue, it was like, that was the best day of my life. I was smiling. I don't think I've ever smiled more than I did on that day. And so there was this incredible wave of elation that stayed with me throughout the best part of the next year. So smiling about it was always just what happened for me. There was a lot of smiling. Yeah. And I'm never uncomfortable talking about it either. Like it was weird. The first time I caught up with my friends in London after the accident, and people were like not asking me anything about it. I think they were just like pretending, like it was as if it had never happened. And it was so uncomfortable and felt so weird, because to me it was like, I'm holding this thing now and I really want to talk about it, or I want you to ask me about it, because I would have questions, So I said, guys, okay, look, you can talk about it. And they're like, okay, I have so many questions. So, I've always been quite happy to be open about it.
Did any other questions surprise you?
There are always questions that surprise me constantly, from readers or friends, or just, I'm so interested, and this is what I really love about your podcast, is that asking questions is how we understand each other, and we should be asking more questions. And I love it when somebody asks me a question that I haven't heard before, or that I wasn't expecting or had never thought about. So there have been some really interesting ones, but none I can call to mind at the moment.
Sure. As I was reading the book, I was waiting for the moment where you accepted what your fate possibly could be out there. And I would love to hear from you. I certainly read about it, but I would love to hear from you. Like, what is that moment like where you begin to feel the resignation of this might actually be happening?
It was incredibly peaceful. It's a moment that I can still think about now, and just remember how at peace I felt. That last night, kind of giving into acceptance and sort of, appreciating elements of my situation in a strange way. And I think it's because I'd never really felt that relaxed or peaceful. And it's strange that to feel that in such a dire moment, in such a dire situation. But it's almost like, well, you can stop fighting everything and worrying about things, because it's just, this is it now. There's a real finality to it that you're forced to just be in that moment in the most profound way. And it was beautiful.
You used the word appreciate there. What were you appreciating?
I was appreciating the fact that if I was going to have to die young, that I was dying out there in the desert and in the wilderness, which is, you know, my happy place. I was dying somewhere where I felt content. I felt myself. I felt, you know, I felt like I belonged there. And I thought, well, this is great because, you know, there are worse ways and worse places to go. And, you know, I don't want my life to, if it's going to end anywhere, then this is the best place I can possibly think of.
Did at any point the pain from your shattered pelvis go away when you were out there?
No, no. But a combination of adrenaline and being very, very still kind of kept it manageable. So, you know, I mean, it was the pain. I mean, it's funny. I can't remember the pain so much now. I think, you know, our brain blocks out pain so that, you know, we block out that pain trauma. But it was enough that it stopped me from moving. I mean, I physically couldn't move, but even to just attempt to move, it was too much. And so it just kept me lying very, very still, even more still than I was forced to be.
I gotta believe it's frustrating to try and explain and write this and never. Do you feel you have the words to explain what happened to you out there, or is there just a point where you reach frustration that I can never make you truly understand?
There is a little bit of that, and then there's also the, you know, my deep-seated self-doubt of not being able to, you know, find the words to write it in a way that I would like, and to always, you know, always think, oh, I could have explained that better. I could have put these other, you know, put more of this detail in, and you know, that's frustrating to me. I mean, I have this, you know, long-held sort of, this is one of the fears that I talk about, these obstacles of being misunderstood and not expressing myself properly. So, you know, it was really hard to overcome that because there was so much that I wanted to share that, you know, even with the best will and words in the world, I don't think I would ever be able to let people know exactly what that was like.
I can't imagine having that experience and not being able to give the full detail of it. Frustration was the only word that came into my mind.
Sure, yeah.
I thought one of the most, again, I've used the word poignant already, but another extremely poignant part of the book was when you said you saw the picture of yourself being rescued and it looked like that's how I would look like if I was dead. Do you have the words now to describe that? Like that feeling when I read that in the book, I got chills. It was eerie to me. I can't imagine what that had to have been like for you, Claire.
It was just it was, you know, I'm sitting in a restaurant with this guy who saved my life and he's showing me these photos and I see this, the only picture he took of me. And it was like, wow, it just really drove home that this could have been so different. And it is weird, like to see yourself dead in a way.
Yeah.
Was, I mean, I don't know if I do have the words for that, but it definitely, what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, I mean, words escape me, but yeah, it made me really understand how different the outcome could have been.
Perhaps not words, but what emotion did you feel seeing that picture, looking at that picture?
I think shock.
Really?
If shock is an emotion.
Yeah.
Shock, and also, I mean, just trying to think. I mean, again, I think gratitude. Not gratitude because it just made me think, wow, that, I could have been lifted out of there, as a corpse. And it was just trying to process that. It was a real stop and think about that moment.
Well, I want to switch gears a little bit here, because you do spend a lot of time in the book writing about all of the things we've already discussed, and you relay it quite often back to childhood and the fact that you grew up with a brother who captured, I'll say, a lot of the attention of those around you because of his own personality and traits. But Claire, I felt you were still pulling back even into the description of that. And you're laughing now. Am I hitting something here?
No, it's just I feel called out. I was holding back, and the reason I was holding back is because out of respect for my family. It's a very and for my brother, it's difficult because you're writing about somebody else, and even though I'm writing about my own experience, I don't want to hurt anybody. I can really just share a glimpse of what that environment was like without exposing anybody, he had, his own struggles that I will never really know about or understand, but certainly the impact that his issues had on me and on everybody, it still resonates to the point where it's hard for us to really talk about it as a family. So for me to put it in a book and put it out there, even when I wrote, I know it was difficult for my mother to know that it was going out there. And, she's, like anyone sort of suddenly faced with processing some things and maybe they don't want to face or process. So yeah, the fact that you could see that is that's why I'm laughing, because it's like, yeah, I was totally holding back, but that was deliberate.
And understood. I firmly believe not everyone gets a front row seat to our healing. So that totally makes sense to me. I would love, though, to hear your perspective on what did young Claire, what could have lifted young Claire out of those thoughts, out of those emotions that eventually grew into the struggles that you're still processing today with or without the experience that you had in the desert.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What did young Claire need?
I needed to have my emotional needs met, to know that, to have some kind of, actually it's a good question because I'm trying to think of what it was I needed. And because I didn't have it, it's hard to know what that was. But I think just feeling that I was made to feel safe and seen and that there was somebody sort of there to sort of protect me, because I felt like I was always having to protect myself. Whether or not that was the reality, it was how I felt growing up, that, I had this lock on my bedroom door. I was in my bedroom. That's where I was safe by myself. In my teenage years, I was a latchkey kid. I was kind of like always left to my own devices. And I think really that, that became my default natural way of being, which I'm trying to obviously still to this day kind of unpick it and unpack it a little bit. But yeah, I think if I'd had more people around me kind of helping me, holding my hand through, my emotions, I think that would have made a really, really big difference. Even just to say, how are you doing? How are you feeling? Are you okay? Then that's sort of thing that makes such a big difference.
The answer to those questions, how you doing, how you feeling, as you write about, is so often met with, I'm fine, I'm doing okay. At what point does that become not the truth, but the mask that you reference? When does I'm fine, I'm okay? When did you feel, hey, that's not the truthful answer, but I'm going to say it anyway?
I think the moment I write about in the book, the moment when I had a fainting incident and, I injured myself, and I'm tiptoeing around my flat in the middle of the night, trying not to wake my flatmate, despite the fact I'm bleeding from my face, because my brain was like, oh, I don't want to wake her up. I don't want to be annoying. And so when she called me out on that, it was like the wake up call that I needed. And I realized how often I was saying, I'm fine. And again, having to really understand, am I saying this for their benefit or for mine? And is it because I don't want to address how I'm really feeling, or is it that I don't believe I'm anything but fine? Like, how far in denial am I at this point?
I half expected you to say, I'm fine, to your rescuers. I'm doing okay.
It wouldn't have surprised me had that been what I'd said to them. I'm fine. I'm just a bit thirsty.
Oh, my goodness.
A lot of New Zealanders actually joke that that's probably what most New Zealanders would do, is just like, oh, I'm fine. Just, I could use a drink.
I know.
Really, like, you really downplay things. It's a cultural thing.
Present party included in that, even though I'm not a New Zealander. I think a lot of people would. When you hear other people say that now, and knowing all that you know and been through everything you've been through, do your antennas go up when you hear the words, I'm fine?
They really do. And especially if it's someone you know well, and you know that, or you suspect that they're not. And so there's, and I think I moved back to London into what was expected to be my normal life a month before the pandemic. So it was immediately not coming back to my normal life. I was coming back to this very different situation. And what was, feels weird, a weird sentence to say, but what was nice about it was that people were less likely to give you the I'm fine answer when you ask how they're doing. It was almost like, okay, we're all in this situation where it feels like it's okay to put the mask down, because I'm not going to suddenly be feeling vulnerable and weak because there's a valid reason for me not being okay. And so, we could all start having these conversations about how we're feeling. I'm feeling really anxious. I haven't been sleeping. I cried for 4 hours today, all of this stuff. And I don't know if we would have had those conversations, or they wouldn't have come so easily beforehand. But even now, as things are sort of starting to relax a little bit, definitely. And friends do the same for me now, I think, too. It's like, oh, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Yeah. But, how are you really? And it's always like, ask again, and just check in and get them to elaborate a little more on what fine looks like.
And you just went where I was wanting to go with you, Claire, is like, how do we gracefully, appropriately, when that intuition goes off that, hey, they're saying I'm fine and there's something beneath the surface here, how do we gracefully broach that topic, especially with people that are near and dear to our hearts?
I think the key is to let people know it's safe to not be okay, and to say so, and that, that if someone says to me, no, I'm not okay, then I'm not going to suddenly fly into a panic and try and fix their problems for them, or make them feel vulnerable or silly. Not to be like, oh my gosh, you okay? Oh my God, don't, because I respond badly to that. I'm like, but if somebody's like, oh, do you want to talk about it? And then it's like, oh my gosh, really just give them a non-dramatic, but really respectful and open forum for them to tell you in very real ways how they're doing.
How do you think you would have responded to that kind of conversation prior to your accident?
What, as in the asker or the askee?
As the one being asked the question.
I may have doubled down, but I don't know. I think I certainly towards, as I got closer to moving to Canada, and I was very aware of the fact that I was, keeping all my emotions into myself, I think had people really pushed me to, in that gentle and non-dramatic way, to open up more, maybe I would have started to be more honest about things. Yeah.
Going back to the desert, why was it so important for you to go back after you had healed and rehabbed and walk that trail. I certainly get the semblance of wanting to complete the trail, but that just seems really overwhelming, to be very honest, Claire. And as a hiker myself, it just seems like so overwhelming. Was it?
It wasn't. And it's funny because so many people say to me, I don't think I could have gone back there, or it would have been a long time till I would want to do that. But, full disclosure, I was already thinking about it when I was in the hospital, that how much I wanted to do it. And yes, there's something that's symbolic and, getting some closure from this thing. I don't know if I can even explain why I wanted to do it, because I don't know if I even understand it. It was just this need, this desire. I want to come back and finish this trail. But part of it too is simply that I fell in love with the desert there. I really felt so happy in that place, obviously before things went wrong. And I wanted to come back and almost like in that happy place again for myself, and not let this, traumatic event sort of be the overriding association with that place.
I know I keep asking you about your emotions, but this is what's most interesting to me. You get to the little sign that you missed that took you off course. Were you angry?
Was I angry? I wasn't, actually that maybe I was a little bit. I think I was just taken aback how easy it was to miss. And I think I was also angry at myself, or frustrated in myself that, clearly people aren't coming off this trail all the time. So what did I do wrong if I'm the one who missed it and almost died? Like there was that feeling of, well, am I an idiot, or is this just, because to me it was like, that would be, if you just look the wrong way when you're passing it and the sun's in your eyes, you'd miss that little turn off. I don't know. And then you come to this rock wall where you have to sort of jump down, and maybe other people would be like, well, this clearly seems the wrong way to go. Whereas in my mind, I'm like, yay, adventurous, let's keep going. Not even any point thinking maybe I should check my map. To me, it was the right way. But not anger. There was a part of me that thought, you know what, I'm going to save up and I want to come and fund a new sign. Like no point in complaining about something. I should try and create a solution instead. So, there's a part of me that still thinks maybe I'll suggest that to the national park one day.
That'd be a great idea.
Buy you a bigger sign.
I love it. I'll donate to the cause for sure. Claire, being that this is a show about asking questions, and thank you for talking about that earlier. Were you asking questions out there in the desert? Like what? I know a lot was going through your mind, but were there any questions rattling through your brain the 3.5 days, 4 days that you were out there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm trying to sort of gather them to answer your question, but I mean, there tended to be questions. I mean, there was the one big question, which was, do I have any regrets? And really doing a lot of thought on that question, and really and sort of feeling glad to realize I didn't have that many regrets, and that actually, as I say in the book, there's so much that I in hindsight would have liked to have done differently, but I wouldn't call them regrets, because this is what living is all about, is screwing up and making bad decisions and growing, But that was one of the biggest questions, is do I have any regrets? There was the question of, there's a lot of questions about, how is anyone going to find me? The logistical questions. And then, questions of, what would I do differently if I had another chance?
As you detailed earlier, getting to that moment of peace with your impending death, as far as you knew it, what has the last year been like for you, looking at how the variety of responses to the pandemic, the situations that we've been in, the arguments that we've been having? We talked about the inaneness of social media. Like, are you just sitting back and observing and being like, wow, like I've got a new perspective here?
Yeah, absolutely. I would find moments, certainly early on in the pandemic, when I would fall into the trap of joining in this discourse of, everyone taking sides and everyone being angry and furious and almost wanting to find things to be furious about because it made them feel better. And I was like, I need to get off this. Like, this is a reminder of why this isn't healthy. Because again, like, what a waste of life to look for things to be angry about. And it frustrates me sometimes to see people getting so hung up. And I don't judge anyone for it. Don't get me wrong. I'm getting hung up on things that really don't matter, or that you think, well, I know you're frustrated. People posting online, I know they're so frustrated because their next door neighbor isn't wearing a mask and, all this sort of thing. I'm like, well, why are you getting stressed about it? If it bothers you, maybe have a friendly conversation with them, or don't, and just get on with your thing. But just we sort of seek out frustrations and irritations. And I mean, I'm still guilty of doing that. I mean, this is part of human nature to do it. But it's like, wow, just maybe not. Maybe don't do that. Maybe, we have such a limited time on this planet. And I know that's the biggest cliche and it's very hard to actually grasp what that means. But, don't be trying to pick a fight with something or someone all the time. I mean, I think that is so fear-based anyway, that kind of behavior and those sort of responses. And I just think, wow, we're all just so afraid all the time. And I just wish people could see that and maybe step back from it.
How do you do that? How do you recognize that behavior in yourself and pull yourself away from it?
I mean, I recognize it when I realize I don't feel good. Like when I don't feel great right now, I feel anxious. I can feel my body tensing up. My mood isn't very good. Like, these are really big indicators that I used to ignore. And I feel that way. Like, if I just go on Twitter or something and then suddenly I'm just reading all these angry posts and I'm just like, I feel really awful. And I'm like, oh, well, that's because you've opened the angry box. Let's close the angry box, as I like to call it, and just step away. And then I'll maybe just not go online for the rest of that day. And I'll go out for a walk or whatever, or I'll read a book. And that's how I do it, is just to step away from that and remember that all that stuff that's going on is not valuable to me. What's going on here right now, this is the stuff that matters, and how I fill this space around me, including in my own head. That is the stuff that is worth investing my time in.
So I got to ask, what is your favorite hike you've ever done?
Oh, would it be weird to say the Lost Palms Oasis in Joshua Tree? But when I went back.
Yeah, I was going to say, which one are we talking about here, Claire?
Yeah, the second time. I mean, that feels like the obvious answer because it was, so meaningful. But outside of that, I'm going to say, I did a hike a few years back with some friends up north in the Lake District, and we went up Helvellyn, which is one of the higher peaks there. And it was a beautiful, perfect day's hiking, great conditions. Started out sunny, there was snow at the top, came down at sunset. I just remember it being one of those moments of just like, this was a perfect day of hiking. And it's kind of what, I always aspire to in hiking going forward.
For sure. What's a question that you wish you were asked more? I know you've probably been asked so many different questions about this experience, but is there a question that you wish you were asked more?
I do think generally, I think it would be nice if more people asked, not necessarily just asked me, but asked each other, is when we talk about things and being like, well, how does that make you feel? Which I know is a very therapy question, but I think sometimes we just talk and we immediately assume how somebody feels about something, and then we don't dig any further. And I just think there's missed opportunities for understanding each other there. And then, I also, just on a more personal note, no one's ever asked me about the dedication in the book. And I mean, it's just like, I just always wondered if anyone gets that there's two meanings to that.
When is someone going to come looking for me? This heat is trying to get to me. I won't let it.
I'm gonna crack it open right now, and I'm gonna ask you about it. So let's get to the dedication. To all those who are lost, and to the ones who go out searching.
Yeah, that's the bit.
What does that mean?
So, it just because I just wondered if anybody understood it. That it's. Well, I'm curious what people make of that, or what they think it means. In fact, I'll ask you. What do you think it means?
To all those who are lost, and to all those who go out searching. Did I say it right again? I got to flip back to it. To all those who are lost, and to the ones who go out searching. To me, you're flipping this around on me now. I got to think on my toes. I'm getting asked the question. Having now read the book and knowing what I know, to me, it is the double meaning is those who are like physically lost.
Right.
And a dedication to your rescuers, the ones who came out searching for you. So it's a little bit of a book to yourself, right? It's a dedication to yourself and the struggles and the triumphs that you came to. But then it's also the mental side of who we are as people, and the fact that right now many of us are feeling lost, and we all need to do a better job. Those ones who go out searching for the answers, those ones who go out and ask the questions. Like you just said, I loved what you just said. We ask how did that make you feel? Ask the next question. Ask the next question that comes to your mind to dig deeper. I'm going on a rant and telling you what your book dedication means. Am I close?
You nailed it. No, it just occurred to me, like, I actually always wondered, does anyone pick up that there's a double meaning? It's both for the people, like anyone like myself who felt lost and went searching and is trying to find some clarity in their life, but also for the people who have got lost in the wilderness, and for those who are going out to search and rescue people. So it's kind of like a multiple dedication. But I just always wondered, did anyone ever pick up on that? And I appreciate that, knowing that that maybe they did.
I love it.
Yeah, that you said it.
I love it, and I'm glad I could ask the question.
Ask the next question. Would you mean like ask the follow-up question, would you say?
Exactly. Yes.
Sorry.
That's wonderful. I love it. No, I love it. I love the humor coming through. Claire, thank you so much. Like I said before we started recording, beautifully written book. Thank you for telling the story, as hard as it probably was to put yourself out there, as you've made that abundantly clear at times in the book. Thank you for doing this, for allowing me to pepper you with all these follow-up questions for the last 50 minutes or so. How can people connect with you, follow along with your story, get the book, all that good stuff?
Sure. I mean, despite everything I've said earlier, you can find me on Instagram and my website, which does need updating, but has all the details there, which is clairenelson.co.uk. And so it's all on there. And Michael, thank you for asking some brilliant questions, as I knew you would. It always gives me more to think about.
Thank you so much, Claire. I appreciate it. And let's stay in touch, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
To all those who are lost, and to the ones who go out searching. I love that dedication from Claire in her book. Just like I said in the beginning, phenomenally beautiful writing from Claire. And I am so grateful to have had the chance and the pleasure to sit down and connect with her and ask her questions about her experience. The link to her book is in the show notes. Absolutely go check that out. So many thanks to Claire for joining me on the show this week. Please do me and Claire a huge favor and share this episode with someone you know who might find some interest and some value in listening to today's conversation. Help spread the good word about the importance of asking more questions. And if you like the conversations with the incredible guests like Claire Nelson that I have on each and every week, subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode. And if you feel up for it, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating of the follow-up question and let others know what you think about the show there as well. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you can always email me at michael@thefollowupquestion.com, or you can go to The Follow Up Question and reach out there. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow Up Question, and until then, keep asking questions.